Is anybody here? I think so. Can you hear me? Can you see me? I think everything's good to go. You! What up? Hello, hello. How's everybody doing? I'm doing great. Just hanging out, did the dishes, made another nice hot cup of tea. Might go riding my bike later, but we'll see. Yes, Gabby, that was the part one. It should still be up. So, yeah. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, get your art supplies out, get your Animal Crossing out. It's time to read, baby. Yeah, that's right. I'll call you out. Hannah, I did post the link and y'all scrolled by it like the feral animals you are. My gosh. Anyway, let's please start. Get Nancy. Are you guys ready yet? Are you ready? Or do you want to keep screaming at each other? Yeah, I know. Okay. Are you guys ready? Thank you, May. I'm honored by your subscription. All right, ready? Chapter 4. Last time she got sent to her room because she flew during the 4th of July picnic, which was a big no-no, and the town gossip was there, and I'm sure you can imagine what is happening. So, Yusuf snurbed. Wow, that's dedication right there. Okay, chapter 4. Lowland Country was immobilized by a pandemic of gossip fever, and as the town's official gossip, Millie May, was suddenly a person of great importance. Folks who in the past had turned tail at the mere sight of her were suddenly inventing excuses to pay her a visit. Years of persistent practice had prepared Millie May well for the sudden spike in demand for her services, and she hit the ground running. By evening time, her rendition of the events at the baseball game had morphed from a 5-minute breathless account to an elaborate dissertation that stretched more than an hour and 33 minutes, including vivid descriptions, a blow-by-blow report, and a short demonstration. Like a wildfire in a hot, dry summer, the news blazed outward and jumped the country line, so that before long, New York, Tokyo, London, and every city besides wanted to know about the mysterious girl who could fly. Millie May worked overtime and was happy to oblige the ever-increasing number of inquiries that came her way from all corners of the globe. From 10 o'clock that night to 6 o'clock the following morning, Millie May was booked solid and talked nonstop, loving every precious minute. She told everything she knew and saw, and even a bit more besides. While the McLeods slept, people they'd never met in far places they didn't even know existed were reading detailed accounts about Piper and the baseball game. Headlines with bold exclamation marks shouted out, "Flying girl catches fly ball. First human flight documented. People flock to Lowland Country to catch glimpse of first flying girl." From Moscow to Saigon to Sydney to Athens and every place in between, breakfast conversation was dominated by one single subject, the girl who could fly. At dawn the following morning, a stampede of reporters had materialized with the morning sun as if by magic and set up camp on the McLeod farm. Cameramen, large news trucks, newspaper reporters, and photographers quietly trained their lenses and eyes on the farmhouse where they waited to catch and record their first glimpse of Piper McLeod. Oblivious to the events of the outside world and the activities taking place on the other side of her every window, Piper slept deeply beneath her quilt. It had taken her a long time to get to sleep the night before, especially as she knew that morning would bring a punishment from Betty for her disobedience. In her confused and exhausted state, Piper had somehow reasoned that if she didn't go to sleep, the following day would be unable to dawn, and the punishment could be avoided. After everything that had happened at the picnic and the baseball game, though, Piper was bone-tired and was relentlessly dogged by her need for sleep. Lying in bed, she was successfully able to keep herself awake by fretting herself silly. "I've already cooked my goose now. Ma and Pa ain't never gonna let me off the farm again. Not that it mattered anyway. None of them kids want to be my friend. Sure there's anything they don't know. No doubt her ma and pa were going to be watching her like a hawk from that point on, too. I reckon I can't forget about I reckon I can forget about getting any flying time tomorrow, or for many tomorrows after that. Piper sighed. If there was one thing she hated more than anything, it was wasting a perfectly good sky. Everything was starting to feel utterly hopeless, especially as Piper knew that she had to do it all over again. She wouldn't have done anything differently. What's so gosh darn wrong about with flying anyway? Everyone's got something they do better than everyone else. It wasn't fair from Piper's perspective that folks were so riled up about it. I'm just going to change their minds, is all, Piper firmly and silently resolved. They just don't understand, but as soon as I give them half a chance, they'll come round. As soon as Piper settled the issue in her mind, she fell under the spell of her dreams and spent the night passing through blue skies dotted with fluffy white clouds. She would have slept most of the morning away had an anxious world not had other plans in store for her. Piper McCloud, as a voice sounded in her small room just after sunrise. Piper turned over half awake. Piper, wake up! Piper showed no signs of complying when suddenly the blankets on her bed were whisked to the floor, causing her to wake with a start. Sitting bolt upright in her bed, she looked about, but the room was completely empty. Great, now I'm imagining things. As if she didn't have enough problems as it was. Piper? The voice said again. This time, Piper knew it wasn't her imagination. It was a male voice, and it sounded like it was coming from the corner by the door. But who, or what? She squinted her eyes and looked everywhere, but the room was empty. Who's there? Don't be afraid. Piper screamed, leapt out of her bed, and backed away from the corner of the room where the voice was coming from. I'm here to help you, the voice said. While that might have been true, Piper wasn't about to take any chances. Without turning her back to the voice, she quickly pulled open the curtains, allowing light to stream in. The morning sun hit the corner of the room, and by squinting her eyes just so, Piper was definitely able to see something against the door. But what exactly was it? It looked like an outline of a man or a wavy bit of air, but all the same, there was actually nothing there. Look out the window! An eager voice shouted from the farmland below. It's Piper McCloud! For the second time that morning, Piper jumped out of her skin, turned on a dime, and caught her first glimpse of something different. Piper's eyes, already open wide, somehow grew wider to take in the fact that every available place on the farm was crowded with people. Lots and lots of people, and all different kinds of them, too. And not only people, but news trucks and equipment. A man with several cameras around his neck was pointing up at Piper with great excitement. That's her! It's Piper McCloud! People with cameras were materializing out of nowhere, and a battalion of high-powered, high-tech flashbulbs took aim and held in their crosshairs the figure of a little girl peeping out of a window. They fired at will. Piper's startled eyes took a direct hit, and she was thrown backward, clutching her scorched cornea. Ow! Piper stumbled blindly, falling to the floor. Piper, that you making all that noise up there? Betty entered Piper's room a moment later, feeling a strange gust of air brushing past her. This was to be the least strange thing that happened to her that morning. To her astonishment, she discovered Piper curled up by the bed, holding her eyes. Bright lights, brighter than Betty had ever thought possible, were throbbing nonstop from outside the window, and then a crane-like contraption rose up into the air, upon which sat a man, crouched behind a huge camera. Heavens to Betsy! Mom, my eyes are burning up! Snapping out of it, Betty lunged forward, scooping up Piper. Mr. McCloud, she screeched. Mr. McCloud, we're being attacked! Joe went up from a dead sleep to a dead run. He entered the hall, clothed in his long underwear and his 12-gauge. There's everywhere, Betty said, as she bustled Piper into the corner of the hallway. Went and blinded our Piper with something terrible lights, and they're trying to take over the place. Joe bounded down the stairs. He headed straight for the doors and double-locked all of them, and then propped chairs up against them, just to be certain. By late morning, the siege was still going on and showed no signs of abating. 2 windows had been broken, the hens had lost over half of their feathers, and the number of reporters had grown exponentially. Betty, Joe, and Piper remained huddled in the upstairs hallway like frightened prey. Thankfully, Piper's vision had almost completely returned, except when she looked too far right or left, and then it hurt like heck. Outside the house, the noise grew and grew. More trucks, more people, more shouting. Mrs. McCloud, how long has your daughter flown for? Mr. McCloud, did you teach her to fly? Will Piper come out and fly for us? And on they persisted until Piper thought she'd lose her mind. Suddenly, the outside world was downright frightening. What's more, it was making her ma and pa scared. which in turn made Piper feel terrible. She racked her brains for a solution. Mom, maybe I should go talk to him some and they'd let us be. You'll do no such thing. Betty held on to Piper firmly. They're strangers, every single last one of them. There's no telling what they'll get up to. No, sir, you ain't going nowheres. But, Ma, what if they never let us alone? What then? The good Lord will watch over us and protect us, child, that's what. As it turned out, Betty was partially right. Someone was indeed about to protect them, but their orders came from a slightly lower realm. Deployment of the Containment, Security, and First Contacts Unit commenced at 0200. 10 hours later, a line of 20 unmarked black SUVs and 2 transport trucks sped toward lowland country in strict formation. They dominated the roads, pushed smaller vehicles onto the shoulder, and held to their course, undeterred by the collateral damage of crossing animals or loose livestock. Agent A. Agent, yes, his last name was some strange cosmic joke, was actually Agent, and no, he didn't become an agent just because his last name was already Agent, approved and scrupulously supervised every move. He was a humorless man of indeterminate age who stood ramrod straight and held a steady body fat count of less than 3%. His men made jokes that he was more cyborg than human. Had Agent overheard these jokes, he would have taken them as a compliment. When they arrived at Ground Zero, also known as the McLeod Farm, the situation was about as bad as they'd ever documented. Media and general onlookers had flocked to the scene and were posing what Agent considered a threat to their target, also known as Piper McLeod. Rising alert status to Code Red, Alpha Team, and Omega Team on standby for immediate deployment. The convoy roared up to the house, and in record time, 50 agents equipped with every conceivable piece of technology achieved predetermined targets. Security forces rounded. One second. Hello? Oh, it's my mom. Bye, Mom. Lost my place. Technology. Security forces rounded up media and civilians alike and escorted them from the premises, while containment crews confiscated all tapes, pictures, and evidence. Area 4B secure. Area 7L secure. All containment protocols complete. In T-minus 5 minutes, Agent stood in the epicenter of the completely deserted farmyard, meticulously monitoring every detail of his men's movements. He was a perfectionist who left nothing to chance and was careful to ensure all safety protocols were in place. You could never be too careful when establishing first contact, and all eventualities had been accounted for. He had to expect the unexpected at all times before calling in his next order. Tobin, hello! Air unit, you are clear to land. Roger that, team leader. High above the farm, a massive helicopter dropped out of the clouds. It was bigger than even the largest military helicopters, and the force of its blades was devastating. What's that sound? Piper called over the din from the huddle in the hallway. Betty didn't answer because she was too busy praying. Joe didn't answer because his mouth had gone completely dry. And then more terrible than all the noise and the shaking was the ominous silence that soon followed when the mighty beast outside had settled itself in the dirt. In the farmyard, Agent smartly opened the helicopter door as one dainty leather pump, followed by its twin, stepped down into the dusty McLeod soil. They belonged to Dr. Letitia Hellion. Reed thin, she was as delicate as a prima ballerina combined with the aura of a majestic fairy queen. She wore an elegantly tailored black suit beneath which peeked a crisp white linen shirt made from the finest cloth. Her hair was coiled into a lovely twist at the nape of her neck, and its jet black sheen set off deep green eyes and the purest, whitest skin. Anyone who was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to set eyes on Dr. Letitia Hellion swore she was the most exquisitely beautiful woman they had ever seen. She walked with such grace toward the house that it might have appeared that her feet didn't touch the ground at all. Agent, and 2 other agents who flanked her movements appeared like Neanderthal apes in contrast. Knock, knock, knock. Dr. Hellion, Agent, and more than 50 security, containment, and science personnel waited patiently for their knock on the McLeod door to be answered. In the upstairs hallway, Joe, Betty, and Piper didn't move. Mr. and Mrs. McLeod, Dr. Hellion called up in a clear, refined voice. My name is Dr. Letitia Hellion, and I'm a representative of and for the Governor of the United States of America. Please open your door. All doubt existing in Betty and Joe's minds were immediately dispatched. The McLeods were law-abiding folk, and if the government of the United States saw fit to pay them a visit, far be it from them to refuse their country's call. Before Piper knew what, she found herself standing between her ma and pa in the yard before Dr. Hellion, who produced an official-looking identification card and introduced herself. Shyly studying the beautiful stranger from behind her mother, Piper suddenly felt like a little planet being pulled into orbit around Letitia Hellion's steady and powerful gravitational force. Her white skin, dark hair, and flashing eyes all pulsated with a confidence that was magnetic and inescapable. My men have secured the area and are maintaining the strictest surveillance to ensure your safety and protection, Dr. Hellion said, indicating where all the agents were posted at key points about the farm. I am the director of an institute that specializes in providing assistance to people much like yourselves who find themselves in, well, shall we say, difficult situations. Dr. Hellion considered Piper with intense green eyes. I understand you have a child who likes to fly. Betty instinctively put an arm on Piper's shoulder. Our Piper's a good girl. I ain't saying that we don't got our problems with her, but she never did hurt no one. No, of course not. I understand. We've encountered many people just like you, whose circumstances are unique. It's nothing to be concerned about. We know exactly what to do. Dr. Hellion's manner was warm and reassuring, and the tension in Betty's jaw lessened. Right now, Agent has a few questions that he'd like to ask you. Would you mind if he spoke with you for a moment in private? Agent stepped forward and guided Betty and Joe to the porch, leaving Piper alone with Dr. Hellion. Piper found herself tongue-tied and mesmerized as the full force of Letitia Hellion's attention shone on her. It seems like you've been having quite a morning, Dr. Hellion smiled. Piper nodded. I don't suppose you are used to getting so many unexpected visitors. No, we sure don't, Piper agreed. Perhaps you also had something strange or unexplainable happen to you this morning? Like hearing a voice but not seeing anyone there? Piper's mouth flew open. How did she know? The expression on Piper's face confirmed Dr. Hellion's suspicion. Perhaps we'll speak more about that later. But for right now, Piper, why don't you tell me about your flying? Dr. Hellion spoke about flying as though she was commenting on the weather. Well, after all the trouble, Piper didn't know if she should answer. Letitia Hellion instantly saw the confusion in Piper's face and bent down so that she was eye level with her. Placing her hand on Piper's small shoulder, she held her wavering blue eyes in the strength of her green ones. I know that you don't know me very well yet, Piper, but I hope one day you'll think of me as a friend. If you let me, I could be someone who could really help you. Dr. Hellion paused, seeing the lines of confusion and uncertainty that crossed Piper's forehead. Maybe you are thinking right now, she doesn't understand. She doesn't understand. No one understands what it's like to be so different, to be constantly hiding who you really are and lying about it, too. I also know, though, that you don't like lying. It doesn't make you feel very good. Piper was dumbstruck. That was exactly how she felt. How did Dr. Hellion know? You are also wondering what you can possibly do about it. And the truth is that you don't really know what to do or who to turn to, and you are starting to have moments when things feel completely hopeless. Piper realized her knees were trembling. What do I do? That's a very good question, Piper, and I can help you answer it. But first I need to see how far along you are with your flying. If you've progressed or to inverted loops or maybe even reverse propulsion. You mean fly backward? Piper hadn't even thought of trying that yet. It's a very advanced skill, and I wouldn't expect that you would have reached that level yet. I've floated ever since I was born, but I only just got at the flying. I'd appreciate a few lessons. Then again, some folks around these parts don't take to it much. Piper glanced over to where Ma and Pa were talking with Agent. I understand. It's not easy to do what you do. There are consequences. Dr. Hellion nodded solemnly, and Piper knew she did understand, and what's more, felt understood. I've met many others just like you. Once I have assessed your flying skills, we can sit down and decide exactly where you'd like to go with it. You mean you want me to fly? Now? Here? Yes. Can you do that for me? Piper looked about as though expecting to get in trouble for merely considering the idea of flying. You're sure it won't cause no trouble? You have my word. Dr. Hellion gave her word firmly. Getting to her feet, she stepped away to give Piper room. Please take your time. Whenever you feel ready, talk me through it if you'd like. Piper was well aware of the many eyes that were watching her, not to mention Betty, who was closely minding her from the porch. Well, if you're sure. Piper took a deep breath and turned so that she couldn't see her parents' faces. It sure made a change to have someone actually taking an interest in her flying. She suddenly felt excitement welling up inside her. See, she explained to Dr. Hellion and the men closest to her. Any of you could do it if you put your mind to it. All you have to do is stand still and think about the sky. Piper silently repeated her special words, and a rush of tingling swept through her body. A moment later, her feet left the ground. Next thing you know, you'll be in the air. Simple as that. Piper flew. Everyone looked up. All of the men present had seen many unexplained and classified phenomena. For them, the extraordinary had become routine. It was precisely why they had been subjugated to a painstaking selection process, exhaustive training, and ongoing assessments. And yet, even so, those same men unwittingly let expressions of wonder and awe slip across their hardened features, and let gasps escape their weary lips as they watched Piper fly. No question, Piper McCloud was special, even among the special. Once in the air, Piper decided to keep it simple. Turning a few spins, she followed them with a quick loop-de-loop and finished with a pirouette. Dr. Hellion's breath fell away. Dear God, she really can fly. End of chapter 4. Chapter 5. Piper, there are others like you, and a place where you'll belong. Dr. Hellion spoke quietly, and Piper leaned forward to drink in every single word. No foolin'? True to her word, Dr. Hellion had seen to it that Piper didn't get into any trouble once she landed. Afterward, Dr. Hellion went into the house with Betty and Joe and stayed there a long time before calling Piper in to speak with her privately. In no time at all, Piper felt like Dr. Hellion was an old trusted friend. The only trouble with flying is that it gets so lonely up in the sky when you're the only one, she told Dr. Hellion confidently. I was thinking that maybe I could teach others to fly and then everyone could do it. I mean, it's not so hard once you get the hang of it. Once she got started talking about flying, Piper couldn't stop. Dr. Hellion listened carefully to every single word. Is that what you'd like? More than anything, that and learning to fly better, because I want to fly clear around the world. Piper's face lit up at the thought of it. Then I can see everything, and maybe there are other flyers out there that no one knows nothing about. Maybe I can find them, or at least meet a lot of interesting people in far off places. Sounds like you have it all figured out. Piper shrugged. It seems to me that it hurt none to get yourself a dream and a plan, 'cause if you don't, then you'll never go nowhere. I couldn't agree more. Well, Piper, it's good that you've told me all of this, because your mother and father and I have just been sitting here discussing your future, and I suggested to them that it might be in your interest to come with me for a while. With you? Where? My institute. It specializes in assisting special needs children like yourself and learning skills so that they can fulfill their dreams. You mean I'd get to go to school? Like I was telling your parents, we'll teach you everything you need to know. I'd sure like to fly better. Piper couldn't wait to get some good flying lessons. There is also one other thing you should know, Piper. What happened to you this morning in your room, that voice you heard? Well, I don't want to go into too much detail, and I certainly don't want to scare you, but unless you have protection, there are those out there who would have an interest in getting to you. Unfortunately, they have great means at their disposal, and at the Institute, we can see to it that you are safe. A shiver went up and down Piper's spine. Why would they want to get at me? It's very complicated, and frankly, it's not something I'd like you to worry about. When I spoke with your parents, they told me that the final decision to go to the Institute or not would be left up to you. Based on your circumstances, I think it would be a wise decision on your part. Without hesitation, indeed without even thinking, Piper wholeheartedly agreed with Dr. Hellion, who happily got to her feet. So it settled. Like a whirlwind, Piper rushed up to her room to tell Betty, who was in the middle of pulling clothes out of Piper's drawers. Dr. Hellion says she'll teach me everything I need to know, Ma. Ain't that great? Piper blurted out. And I'm gonna go to her institute. I figured as much, Piper nodded, and Piper suddenly noticed an unmistakable look of great concern on her mother's careworn face. Betty and Joe were simple country folks at their wits' end. They loved their child with all of their hearts and didn't want her going away for even 1 second. All the same, protecting Piper. All the same, protecting Piper from the likes of what had happened earlier that morning was now a heavy consideration. Dr. Hellion promised to keep their Piper out of harm's way. She also patiently pointed out that Piper's special needs required an individually crafted learning program specifically designed for her abilities. Had the McLeods given any thought to how they were going to address that? No. Well, Dr. Hellion was an expert with exceptional children. Her facility was created just for such occurrences and would gather any resources necessary to see to it that Piper had all she needed. No expense would be spared. While it was true that the McLeods were sticklers for their routine, they were not unkind people. They would have cut off their right arms before knowingly hurting Piper in any way, and so, with the greatest reluctance and against their best instincts, they were letting their only child be taken from them. Betty had already packed Piper's warmest sweater, woolen gloves, and socks. Everything Piper owned was all neatly arranged in an old carpet bag that was light to carry, even to Piper's arms. Seeing her clothes all packed up jolted Piper out of her euphoria and stopped her short in her tracks. Ma, what are you doing with all my clothes? Fancy institute or not, I'm figuring you'll need a stitch or two to cover yourself with. Betty pushed Piper's long underwear into the bag. But Piper didn't understand. Why are you packing them all up? You'll have to leave with Dr. Hellion, and you won't be able to live here anymore. What? Piper's confusion grew. But that ain't right. Why can't I walk to the institute like I see the Miller young'uns walk to school every day? It didn't occur to Piper that it would ever be otherwise. Dr. Hellion's institute is real far, Piper. Too far to walk to and too far to come home from, even on holidays. All at once, Piper came to realize that there were greater implications to what had seemed like a common sense decision. She sank down on her bed. No! Now, child, don't get yourself into a state like you says. Dr. Hellion's got everything all figured out. Piper noticed that her mother's hands were shaking as she folded the only handkerchief the McLeods had ever owned, made with a delicate linen and embroidered with tiny bluebirds. The handkerchief had been carefully passed down through the generations. Betty had only ever used it once, and that was on her wedding day. She neatly folded it and placed it in the old bag. Betty was now quietly bestowing it on Piper. This simple gesture woke Piper up to the finality of leaving her parents and the farm. But I didn't know. Piper wrung her hands. What was she going to do now? She wanted to go to Dr. Hellion's institute, but not if it meant leaving her home and her ma and pa. Suddenly, a simple decision had become very complicated, and Piper couldn't figure her way to an Suddenly, a simple decision had become very complicated, and Piper couldn't figure her way to an answer that didn't include disappointment and regret. How had she gotten herself into such a muddle? You'll be safe, and they'll give you a special schooling. Betty could see Piper's mounting concern and tried to reassure her. You'll get to meet other young'uns, maybe make some friends. Piper shook her head. I don't reckon I'll go now. Betty sniffed, turned away quickly, and gathered up a hairbrush. Ain't nothing in this life comes easy to any of us, child. Every road you walk down's got a price. Sooner you'll learn that, the better. Don't matter the direction you go, there'll be some bad mixed in with the good, and you just gotta learn to take the one with the other. Winding up Piper's Sunday hair ribbon around the brush's handle, Betty tucked them in the bag and closed it with finality. You done went and chose your path, and there ain't nothing your pa and I can do about it now. At first, Piper didn't understand what her ma was angling at, and then at once things snapped into focus in such a way that they did make sense. Betty had told her not to fly. She'd warned her to keep her feet on the ground, and Piper hadn't paid her any mind. Sure as anything, she'd gone and caught that baseball, and everyone saw. The whole situation was out of her ma and pa's hands. Like a detective unraveling a case, Piper traced the steps she had taken to arrive at this moment. Leaving with Dr. Hellion was only the latest ramification of the choice she'd made to jump off the roof while lying on the tree branch that day. There wasn't anything she or her ma or pa could do about it now. It was Piper and Piper alone who had brought all this about. I didn't never think this was going to happen, Piper breathed quietly, shaking her head in wonder. Betty handed Piper the carpet bag. Mind your manners now. I will, Ma. See to it that you clean your plate. Betty sniffed, turning away quickly and roughly pushing the back of her hand against her cheek. Best be getting a move on. Don't want to keep all them folks waiting on us. She left Piper's room abruptly and bustled down the stairs. Piper took one last look around the only bedroom she'd ever known before picking up the old bag and reluctantly leaving. When she opened the porch door, she noticed that the fancy cars were packed up and the men in dark suits were waiting next to them at the ready. Dr. Hellion smiled when she saw her. Already? Piper nodded sadly. Off to the side, Joe stood forlornly waiting. I'm going now, Pa. Joe sighed, thrusting his hand to the pocket of his overalls and pulling out a beautifully carved wooden bird. He handed it to Piper, and she took it gently, turning it over reverently. "Was gonna be for your birthday," Joe spoke slowly. "I expect now is as good a time as any. Made it myself." Tears sprang into Piper's eyes. "It's beautiful, Pa. Most beautiful I ever saw." Piper's fingers traced the delicate lines on the feathers of the bird that Joe had painstakingly spent hours creating. It was truly a labor of love. "We'll be waiting right here for We'll be waiting right here for you when you're ready to come back to us." Joe patted Piper's shoulder awkwardly. He wasn't used to so much talking. Piper nodded through her tears. She felt Dr. Hellion's gentle hand on her shoulder and allowed herself to be guided away. Agent lifted her up into the helicopter and expertly fastened safety straps across her chest, which firmly held her against the soft leather seats. The next thing she knew, the door was closed and the engine was revving up. It was all happening so fast. The helicopter lifted off, and Piper watched the strong wind created by the blades blasting against her maw and paw. They stood stalwart against it, waved as the helicopter rose into the sky. Piper kept her eyes fixed not on the sky, but on the waving hands of her parents. Although she knew that they couldn't see, she waved back. Long after all the fancy cars had sped away and the dust had settled, Betty and Joe McLeod kept their eyes fixed firmly on the horizon, where they'd last seen the helicopter. Neither of them moved for a long time. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6. The helicopter flew due north at such a speed that green forest quickly became white with snow. Then the trees disappeared altogether, and there was an endless stretch of wintry tundra that reached in every direction as far as the eye could see. Not that Piper noticed any of it. Slumped over in the luxurious leather seat, Piper's thoughts stayed on the farm, her parents, and how much she missed them already. Dr. Hellion, who was seated next to Piper, reached out and gently squeezed Piper's small hand reassuringly. "I've never been away from my mom and pa before. My ma always says she can't figure where I've come from. She says that there wasn't ever another McLeod like me. Sometimes I thought that was a good thing, 'cause I don't want to be just like everyone else. But then I got to thinking, and it worried me, 'cause I am a McLeod, and if I'm not, then what am I? A person likes to feel like they belong somewhere. For some people, that path to belonging is more difficult than others." Deep understanding resonated through each of Dr. Hellion's words. "I promise you I will help you find it, though." "You reckon?" Dr. Hellion smiled and nodded. Relieved, Piper smiled too. There was something about Dr. Hellion that was so calm and assured. Everything made sense to her in a way that it never had to Piper, and she longed for that same knowledge. Maybe she learned that after that ETA is 1000. Piper heard the pipe, and she began looking out the window to catch her first glimpse of her new home. Pressing her face against the glass, she scanned the white horizon. There was no end to the icy terrain, and they had already been flying over it for quite some time. After a great deal more flying, the helicopter finally began to slow and then descend by a lonely shack no larger than a tool shed, sitting all by itself in the middle of the frozen, desolate landscape. "Is that it?" Piper was disappointed and confused by the shabby structure. "Yes, we're here." With mounting disenchantment, Piper eyed the feeble hovel that looked as though it might be ripped from its earthly troubles by the hungry wind at any given moment. An old rusty sign attached to the structure read, "Government Facility. Trespassers will be terminated." When the helicopter touched down, several men in white snow gear jogged out of the shack and quickly opened Piper's door. "Piper McLeod?" The attendant had to yell over the roar of the engine to be heard. Piper nodded, and her teeth began to wildly chatter as the sub-zero temperature jabbed her. "I'm here to assist you into the facility." The attendant snapped free the many safety restraints and guided Piper from her seat. When her feet sank into 2 feet of snow, Piper instinctively winced. Dang! The temperature was so far below zero that the thermometer had hit its bottom mark and stayed there months before. Inhaling actually hurt Piper's lungs and instantly froze her nostrils. She'd known hard winters, but this cold was nothing she'd ever felt. It was a type of cold that prevented you from thinking straight. "Right this way." The attendant hurried Piper towards the shack. At that moment, any place that provided shelter from the cold became a splendid idea. Piper dashed toward it, thankfully, when another waiting attendant opened the door to speed her entry. Heedlessly thrusting herself inside, Piper entered an entirely new and unexpected world. Underneath the shack's apparently flimsy exterior was a smartly outfitted lobby with thick white marble tiles and clean steel walls. A chandelier of glass and steel hung from the ceiling, and at the far side, an elevator door took up an entire wall. The clash between expectation and reality froze Piper to the spot. Well, butter my butt and call me a biscuit. A moment later, Dr. Hellion swept inside and approached a panel next to the elevator. She touched it a certain way and it snapped open, exposing a very complex computer. There were flashing lights and buttons, and all sorts of other things that Piper couldn't even begin to imagine the use of. Dr. Hellion, of course, knew exactly what to do with them, and expertly maneuvered through a battery of security protocols that included a voice confirmation, fingerprint identification, and retinal scan. Your safety and well-being is part of paramount importance to us, Piper, Dr. Hellion explained, seeing Piper's bewildered expression. We don't take any chances, and so we've created a security system that will ensure that you remain safe while you are in our care. A moment later, the computer beeped loudly, and all the doors in the elevator snapped smartly open. Dr. Hellion graciously stepped aside and allowed Piper's first entry. Piper had never been on an elevator, especially not one as sleek as this. Gingerly stepping abroad, she saw that the entire back wall was comprised of thick glass, and the whole ceiling glowed with light. Ready? Piper nodded, scared and excited at the same time. This really was an adventure. Elevator commence. The elevator instantly responded to Dr. Hellion's commands. The doors swooshed shut, and they dropped downward as the elevator fell at an alarming rate. Unexpectedly, a voice filled the elevator. Approaching level 1, single-celled organisms. Minimum security clearance. The voice was female and without expression. Piper looked around for it. That's the computer voice, Dr. Hellion explained. You can speak to her just like a normal person and she'll respond. Golly! Piper looked up as though expecting to see the computer above her. Go ahead and try. Computer, do cows have feelings? The computer did not respond. Several strange blipping sounds came from the overhead speakers. That's a great question, Piper, but the computer can only help you with questions that are more specific, Dr. Hellion coached gently. Piper thought about it for a moment before trying again. Computer, does my black and white cow got feelings? Yet again, Piper had flummoxed the computer and the blipping sounds increased. Dr. Hellion politely coughed. Try asking the computer our current location, Piper. Where am I now? This elevator is approaching level 1 in 3, 2, 1 second. On cue, the elevator emerged out of the darkness and descended into an incredible underground world. Turning around so that she faced the glass wall behind her, Piper's eyes snapped wide, and then immediately wider still, and yet somehow could not take in all the mind-boggling sights that laid before her. Elevator paused. Dr. Hellion commanded, and they immediately came to a stop. The elevator hung directly in the center of a cavernous man-made well. The facility was approximately the size of a mini Grand Canyon, but instead of rock, it was all steel, and glass curved in a big sweeping circle around the elevator, which dangled in the middle. And an unprecedented feat of engineering, bridges extended from the curved sides to connect with the elevator, yet appeared to be supported by nothing and were nonetheless completely stable. Everything was shiny and white and illuminated by blue glowing light. Huge glass walls made it possible to see exactly what was going on inside each floor from the elevator, while at the same time allowing the inhabitants to look down over a central atrium, which was at the very bottom of the well. Holy cow! Piper squealed and reached for something to steady herself. As I live and breathe, I swear I couldn't imagine of a place like this even if I tried all my days and nights. Look at how the walls is all curved, like they were in the center of a glass circle. It's so shiny. It's near my eyes hurt to look at it. The lights of the facility were reflecting off of the glass of the elevator onto Dr. Hellion's face, and her excitement for the place was palpable. Indeed, Dr. Hellion suddenly seemed to be a girl herself and looked at the facility as though she was seeing it for the first time, too. I remember when I made my first trip down here, and I knew right away that I'd found not just a home, but a whole world that was special. It's so clean and bright, and everything makes sense here. Dr. Hellion pulled her eyes away and smiled at Piper. Every time I leave, I can't wait to return. Doesn't it just take your breath away? It sure does, Piper agreed. There are many extraordinary things here, Piper, Dr. Hellion smiled. That's why you'll feel right at home. Starting on level 1, we have single-celled organisms, and as we descend, you'll notice that each level has more and more complex life. On level 2, we have horticultural specimens and plant life. Level 3, insects. Level 5, marine life. Level 7 is the aviary, and so on and so on. Everything you can imagine, we have it. Unparalleled facilities, cutting-edge technology, and the best minds in the world, all under one roof. Dr. Hellion placed her hand on Piper's shoulder. I hope that you'll be as happy here as I am, Piper. Sighing as though she wished she could stay looking down at the facility forever, Dr. Hellion finally tore her eyes from the glass. Watch carefully. There is much to see. Elevator commence. Level 1. The elevator reported a moment later as the elevator fell. Piper kept a keen eye on the glass elevator window, and though the large glass walls of the first level saw scientists hunched over telescopes and other pieces of equipment that Piper couldn't even begin to imagine the use of, let alone put a name to. Level 2, entry granted. Horticultural specimens. Minimum security protocols in effect, the computer reported. A moment later, Piper caught glimpses of laboratories filled with exotic plants, arboreums with vast rows of shrubs and trees, and facility staff carefully tending and monitoring it all. One particular scientist caught Piper's eye as he leaned forward to smell an exceptionally beautiful rose. Suddenly, the rose's petals pulled back to reveal a mouth with sharp, thorn-like teeth. The rose fiercely lunged forward and bit onto the scientist's nose. Although she wasn't able to hear, Piper could see the poor scientist yowl in pain. Look there! Look there! She pointed for Dr. Hellion to see, but the elevator dropped down another flight. We have special task forces that carefully monitor the globe to identify and locate any species that requires our assistance and protection. That way, we can ensure its safety, and in the cases of some of these life forms, the safety of the rest of the world. Dr. Hellion continued. Piper watched as scientists gathered around a large insect. The insect suddenly gave itself a mighty shake and unraveled wide wings from beneath its many legs. Its wingspan was extraordinary, perhaps 5 feet, and adorned with incredible patterns. The patterns started to move and change hypnotically. The scientists were beginning to fall asleep. Even Piper began to sway back and forth. Amazing! Piper shook herself awake. The entire facility has been created as a smart building, meaning that it has sensors that can detect and answer your needs. The computer voice can assist you with a lot of things, including giving you access to a wide variety of information. Unexpectedly, the elevator came to a stop and a research assistant embarked, holding a glass specimen cage that housed a tiny black cricket. Piper moved closer, and the cricket stood up on its back 2 legs and looked right at her. Intrigued, Piper leaned inward. It was the cutest cricket she had ever seen, and he was just as interested in her as she was in him. He moved to the side of his cage, next to her, and even took one of his tiny legs and put it up against the glass. Piper was entranced. This was like no other cricket she had ever seen, or she had ever set eyes on, and she could have sworn he was sizing her up too. The spell was broken when the elevator stopped and the cricket and his handler disembarked. Unlike the other levels, the windows of the 4th floor were frosted over, so it wasn't possible to see inside. Will I get to know about all the other things I'm seeing? Piper wanted to see and touch everything. That might be difficult. Many of them are dangerous, and most of them are being carefully studied. Unless we know all about them, it's not safe to risk your welfare for theirs. Or theirs. Piper was clearly disappointed by this answer, and Dr. Hellion relented, adding, Why don't we see how things go, and based upon your progress, perhaps certain exceptions can be made. Piper grinned. Maybe she wouldn't need to travel around the world after all. It seemed like everything she was looking for was right here under one roof. There wasn't a place Piper could set her eyes on where a startling and amazing thing wasn't happening. She caught glimpses of a fish that had fur like a leopard, a snake with wings, and something that looked suspiciously like a unicorn. Level 13, humanoid life forms, maximum security personnel only. The elevator had dropped to the very bottom of the well and could travel no further when the door swished open. Welcome to your new home, Piper. Piper's feet found their way into the highly polished stone floor, and she looked about in wonder. The 13th level had 3 tiers, each with a balcony that overlooked the atrium where Piper was standing. A magnificent fountain dominated the atrium, and unusual plants and trees created a sense of division between small sitting areas and tables. It looked exactly like the way would have imagined a very grand hotel. It was all very clean and quiet, but also empty. Where is everyone? The residents are currently busy. Why don't I show you around, and then you can join them? Piper nodded excitedly and followed Dr. Hellion on a tour down brightly lit halls, past a huge library, through a gymnasium equipped with everything from a swimming pool to trampoline, rooms that Dr. Hellion called learning centers, spacious lounges, a science center, playrooms with brightly colored toy trucks, and finally a gourmet kitchen where the aroma of fresh baked cookies made Piper's mouth water. In the housekeeping quarters, a seamstress was on hand to expertly sew together a uniform that would fit Piper's exact measurements. Dr. Hellion allowed Piper to select from a huge wall filled with fabric bolts of every color. It didn't take Piper long before her eye was caught by a beautiful sky blue material made of the softest cotton. Before she knew it, she was standing before a large mirror in her uniform, which consisted of a full skirted sky blue dress with a white collar and white knee socks. In addition to this, her wild tangle of brown hair was liberated from the too tightly woven braids and held back by a blue ribbon. The whole getup was very dainty and feminine, and for a girl accustomed to overalls with multiple patches and church dresses that had serviced generations of McLeods, Piper felt a mite conspicuous as well as a bit gawky. While it's necessary to have uniforms, we like to honor each student's individuality by allowing them to choose their own material and color, Dr. Hellion pointed out as she walked with Piper to introduce her to the class. This is a mite tight around the arms. Piper moved her arms about, noticing how the dress was snugly fitted about her shoulders. Can I use my own clothes to fly in? That's a great question. Dr. Hellion paused, turning seriously to Piper. You know, Piper, I'd like to ask you a few questions about your flying. What about my flying? Our agents interviewed many of the people in Lowland Country who were at the baseball game and saw you fly. Dr. Hellion began carefully. Do you know what they said about your flying? Piper shook her head. They said that it scared them. Some of them said that they didn't want someone flying around them, that it was dangerous and a threat to their safety. One girl, I think her name was Sally Sue Miller, said that she wouldn't ever want to be friends with someone who could fly because she can't fly, and it would make her sad to be around someone who could. She said that? Piper's face went hot with embarrassment. Dr. Hellion nodded. What do you think about that? Piper shrugged, too upset to respond. She tried to blink away the tears that were welling in her eyes. Piper, I care about your well-being. I want you to be happy and joyful, but I wonder if flying is really bringing true happiness into your life. But I love to fly more than anything, Piper protested. Of course. I'm not suggesting that you don't. I'm asking you to think about your life as a whole, about your parents, about your community, and about other people. Do you think flying is a good thing for them? I guess I never thought of it that way before, Piper suddenly realized that things were far more difficult and complicated. Maybe she was hurting her parents, and she certainly didn't want to do that. Maybe all of the folks in Lowland Country had a point. Piper, I know that you are a very sensitive and caring girl. I also know that you'd never do anything to knowingly hurt anyone. Dr. Hellion paused, looking at Piper with deep kindness in her eyes. Sometimes we have to make hard choices, though, and consider all perspectives and other people's feelings, too. Sometimes our true happiness comes from creating a balance between what we like and what's in the best interest of others, and what's called being a grown-up. What Dr. Hellion said made a lot of sense to Piper. She never liked deceiving her parents and flying on the sly. The urge to fly was just so overpoweringly strong. It got the better of her. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Of course not, and I know that. Dr. Hellion put an arm around Piper's shoulder, comforting her. Sometimes it's hard to figure things out on our own, and we need help. That's only natural. Dr. Hellion walked forward, gently guiding Piper next to her. While you think about all that, and also for your safety as well as that for the rest of the class, I'd like you to consider staying on the ground. Would you be willing to do that? You mean not fly? Startled, Piper looked to Dr. Hellion. Just for now. Perhaps in a little bit we can talk about it more and see, okay? The last thing Piper wanted to do was promise not to fly, but Dr. Hellion was so smart and had so many good points, not to mention the fact that she'd been so kind to Piper. She didn't want to be ungrateful. Well, I guess, if you think it's for the best. I do, Dr. Hellion smiled. That's my girl. End of chapter 6. Whew, we did it! 3 chapters. Yes, the next section we get to meet some of my favorite characters and starts to get really fun. So, whew, yeah. What do you guys think? Dun dun dun, Calvin! Oh gosh. Yeah, man. So fun. It did go by really fast. I'm surprised. But it's been 50 minutes, so woo! These chapters were also shorter than the previous ones, but yeah, we did it. It's fun. Oh yeah. So I've been playing Animal Crossing so much that my fingers are sprained. So it, like, hurts to play now. So have to take a break from that, I guess. But oh May. Guess you'll just have to buy the book now and read it the rest for yourself. Oh man. Well, I guess we'll call it a day. And same time tomorrow at 2, we'll read the next 3 chapters and see what happens next. All right. I'll see you guys later. Bye.